good evening. I hope everyone can see and hear me. So yeah, as introduced, I'm Rochelle. I am the founder of Undivided Clothing, which is a clothing line, and we sell culturally relevant clothing for both men and women, unisex, people of all ages, all sizes we cater to, and is specifically sort of culturally relevant and important things. So things that celebrate Black lives and celebrate our cultures and, you know, the differences between our cultures as well. And from each sale, we donate 20% to two charities which we selected. One of those is, of course, the amazing Carif Centre, and the other focuses on helping young Black students get into science, technology, engineering and mathematic careers. And I just personally thought that was really important because I myself have come from I'm sort of in the STEM sort of career, so I just thought it was very important, and I've seen that it's quite difficult to get into that, but I've also seen it's very difficult to sort of start your own business and set up from scratch. So today I'm just going to be talking about that with you all. I do just want to say, again, please, if you can't hear me or if I'm too loud or too quiet, just let me know in the chat, or if you have any questions, feel free to just, I think there'll be a question part towards the end of this, but if you do have any questions before then, just pop that in and I'll hopefully be able to read it just on the side here. Yeah. So I think the first thing that I will do, if it's okay with everyone and everyone can hear me, that I'm just going to talk about how I started, or why I started really. So I recently launched, been just over 6 weeks since I've been running and functioning as an online clothing store. So very new to the business. So if you're looking at someone with years of knowledge and expertise, I am very much still in the learning stage. But I will share with you the things that I've sort of discovered very early on. And I sort of started this because I was very much moved by everything that was happening, like the worldwide solidarity with Black Lives Matter and sort of the protests that were taking place, and just the worldwide sort of support that everyone seems to be very much more open to talking about it. And I just thought, how can I myself help in some way? Funny story, I wanted to sort of go down to the protest and do all of that, but I sprained my ankle, and I thought, since I was sitting at home with my leg up, what can I do to sort of gain, or just contribute sort of to my Black community, my smaller local Black community. And I thought, okay, so what am I good at? And then from that, I thought, okay, so even though I'm involved in the STEM career, I thought, okay, I've always been interested in fashion, I've always been interested in clothing and sort of statement pieces. And I've also previously sort of worked a little bit on doing, creating clothes at home just for myself, personal projects. And I thought, why can't I do this sort of on a professional level? And of course, donate 20% of profit, or donate a certain amount of profit, which I then had to calculate how much was sort of feasible to Black charities. Or charities that help, I should say, that help Black people sort of uplift us and support us and just help to grow and strengthen our community. Yeah, and then I sort of had to start thinking about, is there a gap in the market? Or if there isn't a gap, how would I create one? Or, is this even something that's feasible? Am I able to do this myself? How much help might I need? And most importantly, would people be interested in sort of what I would be selling? And that is really impossible to sort of decide, because you think, you can very easily talk yourself out of a great idea, I think, anyway. So I just thought, okay, why would this be different? And again, I'm thinking because I think it's not just your typical sort of everyday t-shirt, it's constantly sort of a small celebration of our different cultures. So for example, one of the t-shirt small collections that I've got is a rich in culture t-shirt. So it comes in various colors, and it's just a celebration that, in fact, our culture is rich, for example. And I thought that's not something that I see everywhere. So I would like it, maybe other people would like it. And that was sort of just my idea, and sort of where I started going off with that. Yeah, sorry, I'm just thinking about what to go on to. Yeah, so I then thought about, because I'm going to be an online store, how would I then go about getting myself out there, because, you know, I don't have a physical space. I'm not a physical shop selling clothing and accessories in a physical store as you would like on the high street. How would I get myself noticed? How would I get myself out there? So how will people find me? And then I had to do a lot of research prior to sort of starting it up, thinking again, how do other people do it? How do you start out? And I thought, I searched, did a general Google search. Then I had a look on social media, and I've discovered that social media, I mean, it's great for sort of connecting with friends, but it's a really powerful marketing tool if you use it properly. And when I say properly, I mean, I learned a lot of things when I was looking into it, in the sense of, you know, there's different types of posts that you can make in terms of like interactive posts, and ones that are just promoted where you can tag products and it links back to your online clothing store or your online store. And again, that's done through different platforms, and all of that I had to look up and look into to see what's the best platform to sell physical merchandise, I should say. Because of course there's different ones that are better for subscriptions and things like that. So depending on what sort of business you're looking at developing, or what business you're thinking of going into or starting, yeah, there's different platforms that are more suited to certain types of business than others. Another sort of strategy that I had to start thinking about was, I myself, I'm only familiar with sort of Instagram, but prior to starting a business, I had to then become much more comfortable and familiar with Facebook, Twitter, you know, other social media platforms, because I think something I've learned is that it's very important to have yourself available on, you know, for people to connect with you or ask you questions about your brand, discover your brand on many different platforms, because again, depending on who you're catering to, who your target market is for your business, you might not know where to find them. So yeah, just in the group chat I can see, please remember to ask any questions. Please let me just pop them in the chat area. I'll read them and pause my talking and answer them. So I can see I have got a question as what was the hardest part, that's just popped up in the group chat. And I think, if it's okay to answer that now, the hardest part, I think, for me was starting it. I think, you know, having the idea, which I had to, you know, you sort of battle yourself, is it a good enough idea? How can I run with this? How can I grow this? That, you know, getting over that hurdle, that was difficult in its own sense. But then it was once I, you know, had enough confidence to go ahead with it, it was that I was thinking, okay, now that I'm started, how do I make sure that I don't slip, or I don't fall through the cracks, or I don't, you know, do something that's fundamentally wrong. You know, I don't accidentally post the wrong thing on these new social medias that I'm not familiar with. And how do I deal with sort of customer queries? Like, what's the best, the most professional way to do so? Sorry, just seeing something pop up. I lost my train of thought. Yeah, sorry. So it was mainly just that I was thinking, what's the best way that I can continue with what I'm doing? Because I don't want to start something and then the quality of what I'm producing, the quality of service and my ability to grow and continue as a business, I don't want that to suddenly dwindle. You know, I want to make sure I've thought through it. And that was the hardest part, which I'm still continuously working at. It's not something that I just sort of, I didn't do something and then it suddenly just got better. I'm continuously working at that every day. I see another question. How did you develop your marketing strategy? Do you have any advice? So I'm still developing my marketing strategy, if I'm honest, because I started off sort of just doing, looking into research and sort of what I'm most familiar with myself from, for example, other shops that I might buy from. What do they do, which I think works? What do you know, even places that I don't shop from, what do they typically do? And something that I find as a general sort of common thread is that many clothing companies, again, I'm relating to clothing as that's my own industry now, is that they do run with email campaigns. And email campaigns sort of are, they'll email you based on whether you're subscribed to the site. And they'll advise you, for example, on new products or services that you provide, exclusive deals. And generally it creates a buzz, because even if, for example, you know that, you know, you remember that you've signed up, or even if you've forgotten that you've subscribed. I mean, I personally forget what I subscribe to sometimes. And then you get an email and it reminds you of the product. It reminds you of, for example, why you're subscribed. So somebody might have subscribed to my website because they just like the t-shirt design, or they like the quality of the t-shirt, but they might have subscribed because they want to keep up to date on sort of what I'm doing with with the charities I work with. So sort of just reminding them every now and then with emails. That's something, and again, you can opt out of emails if you choose that you're no longer interested. That's something that's understandable, and you can remove yourself from them. But generally, I think it creates quite a positive buzz and a positive sort of air around your business, especially if you don't over email them. And another thing, when it comes to marketing strategies, is that I had to develop my SEO. Sorry if I'm going off. I know that there's other questions here, but I think let me just touch on SEO for a second, because I think that that was something that prior to going into this, I didn't know very much about. So SEO stands for search engine optimization. And what that does is essentially, if you develop your SEO, you sort of come up, rank higher on the search page. So such as Google or Yahoo or Bing or whatever your search engine is. Essentially, if your website has a good SEO, it should come up and rank higher. And that is important, because normally, what I've learned since starting this is within the top 3 organic sort of searches that come up when you search on Google, for example. The top 3 are normally the ones that get 70% of website traffic. And what that means is that out of, let's say, 100 people were to click on this Google page after they've done a search, 70 of those 100 people would click on the top 3. And then the 30% might then click on the other ones underneath it, or the next page. And that's based on, I think that's based on a 2020 article on SEO that I read. What I can do, I can find that article and somehow get it back to you guys if you want to have a read of that yourself, but I can't remember at the top of my head where I read that. And of course, that's really important, because you want to be sort of ranked higher up on these search engines, because again, then people, even if they're not directly trying to find you, they might stumble across you and think, oh, well, it's up there on the top view. Let me click onto this and have a read. And again, that just directs more traffic to your site. Traffic to your site means generally more people just looking on your web page. Generally, if you've designed a good website, they then have a look and they might just see something they like, or even if they don't, they might just remember it to be a very clean website, very efficient website. They might even just like the layout and say, you know, this is a nice, easy to use website, and they might remember it. Or they might, if you've got something eye-catching or deals or something, they might want to come back, or for example, they might just want to share it. And again, that just develops your marketing, and it develops your strategies to get more people in. Yeah, and it's really important. I can talk more about SEO if that's what everyone would like. Sorry everyone. So you can increase your SEO by, I mean, these are all things I had to learn myself, but this was one of the biggest sort of things that I noticed for myself, because starting out when I first launched my website, I noticed that it was impossible. You know, I tell people, oh, just Google us, Google Undivided Clothing, and it was very difficult. I think we started out on maybe the 12th page of Google, and you know, generally, if any Google search engine users out here, you just know that you don't click to the 12th page, you give up. I mean, I'd give up. And then sort of just by building my strategy, so by increasing my SEO, I, for example, use more keywords that people might use in a search. So I'd make sure that that was very visible on my homepage, because that links to, if you've got it on your homepage, somewhere, anywhere on your homepage of your website, and somebody Googles that, depending on how many times it's searched and how many of these keywords come up based on the search, that again raises your SEO, so it makes you come up higher on that list, and again more likely for people to click onto your website. I'm sorry if that makes no sense, but that's, yeah, that's sort of how I think of it. Another way to increase your SEO is by, if you have any photos on your website, even any photos at all, whether it's a promotional photo of your product or service, or just your homepage photo, or just any image at all, your logo, for example, anything on the website, there's an option where you can do sort of an image description. It's similar to a caption that you would see underneath a photo of a newspaper or something like that. And technically, I think in the tech world, not that I'm too familiar with it, it's called like alternative text. And it just essentially is just a written description of whatever's in the image. So again, because it's in words, if somebody searches something similar through the search engine or through Google, through Bing, and it matches what's in the description of the photo, it's likely that the website that's linked to this photo might come up on this website, on the search engine, such as Google. So if you have a photo such as, I don't know, like a photo of a black bag, if you very well and very detailingly describe the bag, such as, you say a black, long, over-shoulder bag with silver detailing, if somebody types in black and silver bag with the long straps into Google, because you've matched 3 or 4 words, technically in theory it should come up higher. And of course that's driving more traffic, and traffic should hopefully turn into sales or views, or whatever your specific website is, which is really important. And there's many other ways that you can improve your SEO. I won't keep blathering on about it because it can get confusing and it can get really frustrating to hear about, but definitely look into it. I think that's one of the most crucial things that I had to learn. Didn't know much about it before this, and now it's crucial. And of course, with SEO, you can search it on Google yourself, just how to develop that yourself. But there are websites, there are professionals that you can hire that actively work on improving that. But I mean, myself, to save some money, I have spent quite a few nights on YouTube reading articles, Financial Times, different YouTube pages, just talking about how you can be using what you have, essentially your own skills, your own text, your own images, to boost your Google rating. So I recommend doing that. Or of course, there are professionals, which I'm sure you can find, and they can help with that. Yeah, I think I bladgered on about that for a long time. Let me see, I think there's another question. Oh, there's loads of questions. Okay, I'm gonna try and get through them. How many years have you been going, and what was your strategy for scaling? So again, I've only been running for the past 6 weeks, which is, I know, very, very early on in this career of mine. But of course, prior to this, I was thinking about it and planning how I could go about doing this. And that, sort of the planning stage maybe took about, just as long as I've been running, maybe about 6 weeks it took to plan and think, okay, realistically, all of these little things to sort of consider. I mean, and this was prior to having the idea in the mind maps. This was the active sort of, I'm going to order this sample, I'll try this. So that took about 6 weeks. And then it took 6 weeks of sort of playing around with different things, experimenting with websites, templates, packaging, materials, all of that. And then 6 weeks later, I was like, okay, I'm going to launch. And, since then I have been growing and I'm working at that. When it comes to scaling, it depends on what you're planning to run your online business as. Like, for example, if it's clothing, that's completely different to if you're planning to sell candles compared to if you're planning to sell jewelry, because generally you might carry many more items. And that depends on sort of your market research, how many sort of people, how many people you plan on selling. And I think, again, without knowing, without being able to directly answer that question, I think it's important to look at how much you think you can grow and sort of the time span that you're working on, because the scaling, if you think that scaling will change very quickly, if you think you might start out only selling 20 units of something in a week, which, that's really good if you do. If you go from selling, 20 units to suddenly you think the following week you might drop to 10, but then the week after that you might drop to 50. You need to sort of have that sort of planned out, which is really, really difficult to plan out. But you have to, I always say, err on the side of caution, save yourself some money as well provisionally. And if you want to, for example, like myself, I had to make some changes probably in the 4th week where I thought, okay, I'm going to run ahead with this now. But then I realized actually I need to change the material. And that was after sort of making up a few of my t-shirts already. And I said, okay, I'm just going to have to accept that and start again. So that's something to bear in mind. So I always think err on the side of caution. And when it comes to an accountant or getting somebody to manage your e-commerce sort of finances, I think it depends on what platform you're planning to use as well. Because, for example, there's like Wix, Shopify, or if you're planning to set up your own website and getting it completely made up for you, perhaps from a website creator or something like that. Personally, I use one of the ready done ones. I've used Wix powers me, and they're able to give me a very clear sort of plan. You know, not to sort of shout out Wix or anything, but it's very simple to sort of follow how the financial side of it, because, you know, they do charge a fee, but that's very obviously laid out and very clearly just sort of stated. And if you have any sort of discrepancies, they follow that up for you. And in terms of general finance, in terms of if you're thinking taxation and things that you might have to pay out rather than, you know, sort of what you're getting in, that's something that I think, again, depending on what you're planning to set your business at, you need to definitely have a look into it, because of course you only get taxed only past a certain amount of income, and this incoming is dependent, you know, on, again, just generally how many orders you get, but also that's your income minus your expenses. And of course it's only certain expenses, so it's all very difficult to answer directly. So I'm just going to go about how did I start the business. So I had an idea in terms of to design clothing and using the profits from the clothing to donate to charity, because my main thought that sort of came to my head was that I want to donate to charities that help and uplift Black people, but unfortunately I'm not in the financial situation where I could donate as much as I would like to. You know, I don't have that luxury, unfortunately. So I thought, what could I do to sort of generate some income, which I could then, you know, fairly give away and sort of regenerate, you know, money into our community. So I thought, because I previously have a textiles background, I used to do textiles whilst I was a student at school. I always loved it. I thought it was amazing, and I always enjoyed it. My mum, you know, I got my mum involved in the projects. One of my aunts, again, works within fashion, so I was very much sort of always interested. But then, you know, I sort of I followed a career path down into in science instead. But I've always been interested, and I thought, okay, I can do both. It might not be easy, but let me see about how I can balance this both and how I can try and do both. And I just thought about how can I make this feasible? How can I make sure that this doesn't take up, you know, it doesn't cost me too much to start this up. It doesn't, you know, I can make sure that I don't work at a loss. And that's just literally, I sat down with an Excel spreadsheet one night, really early, started, and I just started crunching numbers. And I said, if I spend this much in the first week, how much do I need to generate and by what date, so that I'm not constantly working at a loss. And then of course it needs to be worthwhile to the charities. You know, there's no point me doing all of this and I can only donate a tiny amount that's, you know, maybe negligible to them. So that was something. I hope that's answered your question. What does the next year or two look like? What's the dream vision? So this is something that I find was a really interesting question when it comes to my business personally, because my main my main goal was to make sure that I could sustainably sort of continue to donate to charities and see a difference that way. I was just hoping that I could make sure that my brand grows enough so that, again, of course, I get more orders, more customers, the brand grows, there's much more awareness with my brand, Undivided Clothing. And with the awareness, because the charities are directly linked to my brand, because I'm very vocal about helping them, very passionate about helping them, other people become much more aware of these charities. They might want to donate separately from my own brand. They might want to work with the charities. They get more awareness. And I just wanted, when it comes to the clothing side, because that's more of the sort of charitable side, but when it comes to the clothing, I just wanted to provide Black and other culturally diverse people the opportunity to wear clothing that is representative of them, which I found personally quite difficult. You know, I was looking around again during the beginning of COVID when all the Black Lives Matter protests were happening around the world, and I was looking at what can I potentially, you know, wear and showcase to just show my solidarity. I know that clothing is not making the world of difference in terms of fighting for peace and raising our voices, but it's just providing awareness again. And it's just, you know, the way I saw it is, if I'm happy to spend X amount in this European store, why couldn't I wear something that was representative of Black culture? And I thought that if I want that option, surely I'm not the only Black person that might want this option too. So I want to just keep providing Black and other cultural people, ethnic people, with this option to wear some more ethnic based clothing coming from somebody who is actually of an ethnic background, you know, because sometimes I found that you could find things online on big selling platforms, and you know, it was coming from Japan, it was coming from America, and it's like I don't know where it's actually coming from. So yeah, that's sort of my plan. I'm sure I don't think I answered that directly actually, but that's the reason why I want, my vision isn't like a set goal, it's not a set amount, it's not to get into this shop, it's not to be sold on this platform, it's just to keep providing people the option of having this as an option in their clothing and their wardrobe, and raising awareness to charity. I found it incredibly difficult to find a manufacturer. It's very, very difficult because unless you know somebody, or unless you know the industry, they're all very hidden or tucked away, or the ones that are very well known or you can find easily by doing a quick search, they want, you know, crazy bulk orders of like 2,000 units. And it's like, I don't know if I'm going to sell that much. I mean, ideally it'd be great if I could do, but you know, starting out, I can't commit to selling that much. But when as you're asking me about printing and embroidery, all of my, at the moment, we don't offer any embroidered items of clothing or accessories. They are printed, but because again, I was struggling to find it, I'm somebody who very much, that wasn't enough to keep me down. So I have invested in a machine and some software, and I print it myself. So that's what I do. And yeah, I'm very proud to say that. I'm proud to say that I do it myself, but I saw that as a hurdle. I saw that as a big sort of barrier that I'm struggling to overcome, because it was very difficult to find UK-based people who would print for me and people who would provide the material. And I just said, let me just do what I can myself. So I order the labels. I mean, I don't print the labels myself, but I order the labels, I sew them in, I print the designs on the t-shirts. Sorry, I say I wouldn't be able to do any of this without my mum, because, you know, it's a lot of workload and she's amazing, so she always helps me. So unfortunately, this was one of the unfortunate hurdles I had to overcome in the early days, where I thought I could use a laser printer, and I discovered that because of the type of ink, or perhaps it was the laser, or the type of material, because I use 100% cotton t-shirts, that it didn't hold in the t-shirt, that it, you know, the dye washed away in a few washes, which made it, I mean, in my point of view, pointless to try and sell something of quality to say it's quality, and it just doesn't last a long time. So I use, what do I use? I use vinyl, and I've got software which will help me. So I design it using the software on my Mac, and I then cut it accordingly to how I want it, and I then manually sort of maneuver the material into the design I want, and then I then adhere it to the t-shirt. What was your aha moment, and how did you move forward to make your dreams a reality? It's a really good question. My aha moment was when I realized that I was using the wrong material 4 weeks into making it all. And I realized that, because essentially the way I saw it at first, I panicked and I thought, oh my gosh, I've wasted all this money. You know, I've wasted all these t-shirts I've made up, you know, I've put all the labels in, I've spent all this time doing this, and it's, you know, this isn't good enough, or I'm not happy for it to be sold under my name, under my brand. I want to do it again. And I thought, okay, at this point, I'm not going to quit now. I have to just push through, accept that that's a small loss that I've had to make, and I'm only going to get better. I now know that I can't do it this way, and it's better to use this method, or it's better to do this particular way, or with this particular material. And that was sort of my aha moment, where I realized, again, what materials don't work with other materials, and how to overcome when I have a small sort of hurdle. Well, it's a very big hurdle, but how to overcome the hurdle. I think that hopefully this answered. And how to make my dreams a reality. I'm still actively trying to make my dreams a reality. I want to keep raising awareness. I want to keep growing the brand, and I want to keep growing. You know, I just think that this shouldn't have to end anytime soon. I'm hoping that more people will buy into the brand, buy into Undivided Clothing, and being, you know, more together and more charitable. Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to get through the questions. I'm aware of the time. I think I've answered the question about an accountant, but what steps do you need to take to put out a small business, and how do you find the best manufacturers? So again, it's really difficult to find the manufacturers. It's very difficult. In truth, it's probably easier to find them internationally, in terms of like out of the UK. I feel like that's maybe something, because I think that's generally what a lot of big brands do. They outsource. But again, I struggled, and I just said I'm going to do it myself. So I know that that's not what everyone would do. So I don't think I can help with that part of the question. But in terms of what steps do you need to take, I can answer this, because there were a lot of steps I had to do in the beginning stages. I had to calculate all my initial startup fees, because there was no way I was going to pursue this if I didn't think I can make this financially sort of stable. Even though I accepted that, you know, startup fees might completely outweigh what I might take home after the first couple of sales, you know, first couple of months, really. I just thought, let me make sure that I'm fair and reasonable with it. So for example, things that caught me out was the cost of a website. So if I didn't make it myself, even if you get someone to make it for you, generally that's at a fee. The cost of your domain, which is your website name, generally they come at a separate charge. You might be able to catch up as a deal, so it's free, maybe, if you're fortunate to. I've heard that people have done that. Unfortunately, that was an additional charge for myself. Something else to consider is whether you need office space, or if you need to register your business somewhere, because if you do, that's going to, again, be another initial startup cost. Any equipment you might need. So for myself, it was all my machinery, the software that I had to get, all the different materials I tried, because of course, I mean, if anyone's looked into clothing, you know that, or you know, even if generally if you shop quite often, you know that not all cotton t-shirts are made the same. You know, some are better quality than others, some are thicker, some are stretchier. They're normally cotton blends if they're a bit stretchier, but you need to consider all of these things. And personally, I'm very much hands-on, and very much I like to see and feel everything. That's an additional cost if you have to order all these in, and you have to accept that they might just be trials, so you might just have to throw them away. You're literally going to throw away some things sometimes. But another thing I had to consider with all these startup fees is you have to consider what you already have, compared to, like, if you have anything that, even if it's not 100% perfect. So for example, as Lorraine mentioned about an iron, if I thought before, you know, could I just continue with my iron, because of course an iron's, you know, relatively cheap, does the job, but is this going to be as good as I need it to be? Maybe not. Am I willing to run the risk? Maybe not. You have to calculate that for yourself, and see whether you're happy to go ahead with what you've got, and see if, you know, for example, my printer, when I first tried to print them myself, I was thinking, okay, I've got a printer, I can use it. It wasn't the right printer. I ordered another printer. I realized that the issue isn't the printer, it's the actual ink and the method. So then that's an expense that I incurred, and I realized, okay, this isn't the best method. I have to try again. Something else to consider is, if you're going into fashion, seasonal changes, fashion trends. they change very quickly, and you have to be ready, you have to be prepared. So you always have to look to look forward, essentially. Don't try and make for what's right now, try and make for what's potentially coming. And even if you haven't made up for that, you have to just think, if something were to change, for example, it's been 30 odd degrees for the last how many days, and now it's raining. If you're suddenly going to keep produce items of clothing, or I don't know, something that's suitable for really hot weather, think, will this affect my sales for when the weather's not so great? All these things you have to consider, and you literally just have to sit down, brainstorm, pens, paper, just think about little things like that. Something else, steps you need to think about. So legalities, if you're going to be breaking any laws, you don't want to start something and then realize that you might go to prison because you've done something wrong. So research, generally the gov.uk, I think that's the website. The government website is generally very good and very clear. I mean, it's quite difficult to use, it's not very clear to use, but when you find the information, it's generally quite clear on what you can and can't do. Something that I needed to realize, you need to think about whether you actually have the time for these things as well, because it's not something that you start and then it runs by itself. It's very much, you have to keep driving it, you have to keep putting a lot of time into it, a lot of effort, a lot of money. You have to be constantly ready to learn new things, because everything changes. You have to make sure that you're open to communicating with anyone and everyone, people who might help, people who might have advice, manufacturers, even other brands, they try and reach out to you perhaps. You have to just be open to communicate and not be too afraid to just try. And hopefully people are good to you and they're not going to sabotage you or say anything horrible or lead you down the wrong path, but generally people will try and help. So you have to be open. And something for me, which I thought was a very big deal, but I do this generally, I think, is you have to sort of think about and predetermine what is the worst that will happen. And in a positive sense, what's the worst that will happen? Because go ahead, try it. But in sort of like a bad way, what could really go wrong and set you back? If you spend too much in the first 2 months, will you then have enough to keep going in the third month? Or will you essentially bankrupt yourself? Will you be able to keep generating new customers? Have you got your marketing in place to do so? Because it's great if you have the very, very best product, but if you have no way of communicating or sharing that with people, or letting your brand die out, you're going to be in trouble. So you have to just sort of predetermine what might be your shortfall. But I know I have to be a bit quicker, so I'm going to move on to the next question. How do you narrow down the type of fashion items that you sell? That's a really good question. For myself, I thought, because starting this, I thought, really, really big. I thought, oh, we can do everything. We can launch everything at once. And I realized, cost-wise, that's not a very good idea, because you don't know what sells or what will sell. You can sort of calculate and try and guess that and work out from market research if you're able to do that. But you need to think about, realistically, what can you afford to put out at this moment in time, and how many units of that can you sell before you bring out? Because this is one thing that I actually realized after releasing a few t-shirts, a few different designs. If you release too many at one go, that's great to give options, but if you haven't generated your clientele, you haven't generated your customers, are you sort of not spoiling for choice? That sounds really bad, but you need to make sure that you need to make sure that it's very sort of clear what you're offering and they know what to expect, and you don't want to sort of run before you walk. That's my advice. So I've got plans to do other types of fashion items. So for the moment, we're only doing t-shirts, men's, women's, unisex t-shirts, and our accessories that we have are 2 different types of bag. And of course, I'm planning to expand that, but I just thought we need to see how this goes. We need to see how this starts to sell. If people are happy with the quality, because there's no point designing everything that we have in this material, this type of design, this type of style, and people are like, this isn't what we want. So I think it's best to start small and then expand. And there's a question, how did you come up with your brand name? Thank you. I really like that question because the brand name is Undivided Clothing, and it came to me because when I was sort of thinking about all what was happening in terms of the Black Lives Matter protests for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor in America, and what was happening here for Belly Mujinga, I was just thinking one thing that even despite COVID is that we're coming together generally as Black people, other ethnic people, everybody was coming together, and we was generally being undivided, which I thought that was something that in my lifetime I've seen that we're quite divided generally as people. You know, there's always categorization and labeling and colorism, racism, prejudice, everything that's going on. And I just thought the solution to pretty much all of this is that if we come together and we stop being so divided. So I thought I want clothing, what I'm aiming for with my brand is to provide, strength in our community. We can't be strong if we're divided. So, well, in my opinion. And so I thought of Undivided, and of course it's clothing. So clothing. I think that answers that. I've got a question. What's it like working with my mother? And what do I enjoy the most? So, I personally really enjoy working with my mum, but I think that's because generally we've got a very close relationship. But even if we didn't have as close a relationship as we do, I'm really enjoying the fact that I do have that support, and I do have someone that I can genuinely bounce ideas off of without any sort of judgment, you know, compared to just somebody who's just a formal business partner with no actual personal relation to you might find a bit of distance and you're not able to be as open with them, but I don't experience that with my mum at all. And you know, we see things very differently as well creatively. We have different ideas on what we like. We have completely different styles. We have different color preferences. So if it was down to me, you know, everything would be monochrome because, you know, I generally like black and white, but she's very much more vibrant, and that helps to inspire sort of designs that that I get, and patterns that I want to experiment with, for example. So I wouldn't be able to do this without my mum. So I'm really grateful. I'm really enjoying it. And the thing that I'm enjoying the most is I love when people receive their orders and, you know, they give feedback. My favorite part is the feedback, because regardless of whether it's really, really positive or if it's a bit critical or anything, I'm enjoying getting the feedback, because not only does it mean that my product's getting out there, which is what I want, but it's helping me to improve it so that the next time it goes out there to somebody else, I feel like I can provide a better service. You know, I'm improving, and I don't think I'm able to grow as a business. You know, Undivided won't be able to grow if it's not improving. And I can't do that without feedback. I'm also enjoying the making. I enjoy it when it's, you know, not 1 a.m., when it's not in the middle of the night. But I'm generally enjoying sort of putting my time to this. This is a good feeling. And good question, how often do you engage with your users or customers? So that's a very difficult question, because, you know, on social media, we do our posts and we do get some interaction there, which of course we're really grateful for and we really enjoy. We do have a contact form available on the website, which does get used quite regularly, I'd say, considering, you know, what I expected it to be used. It's getting used more than that, where people sort of have questions, queries, people given recommendations, you know, I just enjoy the fact that there's a sort of openness between myself and customers, because again, it's all about not removing the division. And I think that by being able to speak to them, you know, person to person, not automated reply, not you know, machine, I'm really enjoying it. And I like the fact that they know that they're able to speak to me. You know, we do make that very clear on our social media, on our website, make it very obvious that we are here to help, we are here for communication, and if we can help you, we can. And so that sort of happens, you know, on our social medias. I want to say maybe daily. I'd say probably daily we get some sort of interaction from a customer. On our website through our contact form, generally on average at least one or two people a week, just, you know, sending a message asking about sizing or if something's coming back in stock, or our opinion on, you know, what color or what style they think that they might get, which, you know, I'm really grateful for. I really enjoy it. And I think there's time for another question. How important do you think packaging is? That's a very, very important question, which I'll try and answer very quickly. For myself, with Undivided Clothing, we pledge to use completely 100% recyclable packaging, which I know that generally is very difficult to do. But the reason we do this is because, again, I think it's really important that we're not divided as people, but we need to not be divided. And, you know, we need to keep the earth, you know, sustainable. We need to not do more harm to the earth than we do. So I think that's really important to keep it as sustainable as possible. Generally, I know it's quite difficult to do, but it's really important because you want to make sure the packaging still looks good and is functional. But ideally, less plastic is best, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. But generally, you need to make sure that the packaging looks good, it's clean, it's not overly decorated, I think, you know, because the key thing is the product, not the packaging, in my opinion. It needs to be durable because, of course, you don't know who's handling your post. Ideally, waterproof or water resistant anyway, and large enough for the item. You don't want it to be crumpled or anything like that. I think that's helpful. And of course, I think it is very important to try and brand your packaging in some way. So even if it's just the little address or their name, the customer's name, I think it gives it a nice personal touch. That's just my opinion there. And the final question. Do I have time for a final question? Yeah, okay. Has your brand ended up opening opportunities elsewhere? So, not directly yet. I mean, other than, of course, working with the amazing Carif Centre, which I've really enjoyed. Other than that, we haven't, I mean, and of course the other charity that we're working with, we haven't had much other opportunities open up yet. However, it is, again, really early days. I am really positive and hopeful that it will get to that. And I am hoping to work with other people, other brands, other companies, individuals. Literally, I just want to make sure that we're not divided. I want us to be undivided. So I'm happy and open to work with anyone. And, you know, as long as you believe in our message and what we're trying to do, I think that's what's important.